All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today for Think Thursday. This will be the third Thursday of every month. Henceforth, we're going to bring something about culturally responsive teaching to the forefront for it to be more of an introduction to a specific concept, to where we get an understanding and a cohesiveness on where this concept may lie in the spectrum of culturally responsive teaching, but it also leaves the opportunity for you to do more exploring off air in order to get even further along in that area. So today we're going to try to be within 30 minutes. Last time I think I presented, we went about 58. So yeah, trying to beat that record. Going to demolish that record. So get you guys out in about 30 minutes. But before we get started, there are a few things that we do need to be made aware of. The first thing is the chat box. So you guys will be muted this entire time. You will not be able to verbally speak to me or chime in about anything. The way to get in contact will actually be through the chat box. So if you would at this time locate it, it should be, it might be an option on a tab, or if there are three dots in your panel, you can click on that. It'll have a chat box there. If you would just type in there what city you are joining from, and if you are a cat or dog lover, that way I know that I'm coming through loud and clear, and we're just having some fun with it. Okay, we got someone from Tempe, Phoenix, West Covina. Everybody's dog, one cat lover, too many of both of them. How many do you have? No one has equal love of cats and dogs. It's not possible. Whatever. I trust you. I'm sure it's as close to equal as it can be. So, but thank you all for joining. Wow, nine, three dogs and six cats. That's pretty cool. Okay, well, thank you all for joining. And it seems like I'm coming through loud and clear. We have a pretty um, small group that we're going to be working with today, and it's going to enhance it a lot more if we are conversational. If you chime in whenever you feel the need to, or whenever there's a question posed, let's just have that understanding that we're going to be going in this thing together. The other thing to keep in mind, we do not ever think that we are the source of expertise solely. There are so many people who have experiences in education, whether it's in the class, outside the class, with youth in general. You're bringing things to the table as well that we want to learn from, and that people in the group can also learn from. So think of yourself as an expert in this learning community as well. I'm just more so facilitating and introducing concepts and things that we're going to be discussing. But please chime in and think of yourself on that same level. That way you can see yourself as in a position to help the community grow even further. Now, before we get started as well, I want to tell you guys a little bit more about our organization. So I'm Justin. Obviously, I'm on the left side. On the right side is my partner, my wife, Kristen. We are in this together. We are a husband and wife team, specifically around culturally responsive teaching. So we partner with schools and school districts to help enhance their CRT. And it's not a checkbox. You don't get better at it and say, okay, I've done that. It's actually a continuous learning type of thing to make sure um, that our understandings are always going to be growing, because the world is always growing. One thing that happened, I know I was talking to someone about 2 years ago, like, oh man, I got these kids, I got these kids. Guess what came out within the last 2 years that we all know about now? TikTok. TikTok has changed everything. Everyone wants to be a TikTok user, et cetera, et cetera. But that just goes to show you that the world's always changing. So we just got to make sure that we're keeping up with the times. So we were founded specifically to raise the odds of success. We do work with any school district, whether it be private, public, or charter. But we've also worked with mentoring programs or with colleges and universities as well. So we're pretty much all over the spectrum. And yeah, that's pretty much it with that. One thing that I need for us all to do is to get out of our comfort zone. This is something that we go over every time we have a presentation like this or a webinar like this. The reason the comfort zone is where the least amount of growth happens, it's where the least amount of magic happens. And the analogy that we like to give is, if you're working out or lifting weights, if you only do what you know you can do, your muscles are gonna sorry, your muscles are going to experience the least amount of growth. It's when you step outside of that that you're able to allow your muscles to grow even further than what you may have even thought you were able to do in exercising. And we believe the same thing with our minds. So if we get out of our comfort zone, we make sure that we are pushing along, our minds are going to grow even further than what we anticipated them being able to do. The other thing is, since we're talking about culturally responsive teaching, we want to make sure that we lay out the foundation for what exactly it is to the Urban Connection Project. So we have the soil, which is cultural awareness. The purpose of it, or the reason that it is the soil, is because nothing else can truly be built unless the soil or the foundation is solid. So the first thing to keep in mind is cultural awareness. What do you bring into the table? Why do you see the world the way that you see it? We are literally a collection of experiences, and the way we interact and talk with people is a manifestation of those experiences that we portray when we're conversing with other people. But it also it steers us into a direction of how we view things that are happening. For example, when I was teaching, I can recall talking to a student and saying, hey, it's a respectful thing when you look a person in their eyes when they're speaking. If I had never spoke to the student about it, I would have left with that understanding or with that thought. But when I spoke to the student, they said, actually, I was taught that you don't look an adult in their eyes because that's a form of disrespect. It's actually respectful for me to not think I'm on your level, or for me to not look in your eye when you're speaking to me. So it's just a disconnect, but it's simply because of what I experienced and what this student experienced. And imagine if you have a classroom full of students, everybody's coming with their own story. So keeping in mind that we're going to view things the way that we experienced it, but also being open and having the humility enough to recognize that someone else's normalcy may be different than ours. So that's cultural awareness. Is the entire foundation of culturally responsive teaching from their systems, which we're going to get into more later on today. So I'm going to skip over that, but I'll give you a quick thing. The system is just making sure that the hierarchy in the classroom is not an emotional or biased being. And the emotional biased being, sorry to say, it's you and me. We are humans. It's natural. When you experience something over and over and over again, you create a bias. When you are human in general, you wake up, some days you're happy, so you wake up, some days you're sad. Some days your day is going very well, you're going to respond differently than if the day is not going so well. So how do we make sure that our classrooms are not mimicking what we go through as humans, but actually have a system in place that we don't have to worry about ourselves and how we're taking things in order to move forward? The third thing, relationships. Relationship or rules without relationship lead to rebellion. So your students need to see you as a leader. We are all leaders. We're trying to lead our students from where they currently are into a new place, whether it be academically, socially, behaviorally, etc. We want them to follow our leadership. But someone or a leader without followers is just somebody taking a walk, which means that you have to be aware of your presence as a leader as well. And relationship building means generating trust, making sure that the student knows you're in their corner, them seeing you as someone where maybe they're going through something at home and you have no clue what's going on, but because of your relationship, they feel comfortable coming to you and talking to you about it. Now you have an advantageous position in order to reach that student. So relationships are the next thing. And the last thing, rigorous and accessible content. The biggest thing that I recognized or realized when I was working for an education company was that, and it was a for-profit company, which is not a bad thing. They do great things for the community and for education, but they are for-profit, which means they are insanely concerned with their bottom dollar. So what I found out when I worked for this company was that we were tailoring our content to the highest bidders, California and Texas. They had the most money to spend, and we were going after what we were going after with them. And what we ended up doing was taking curriculum that we built for, I'm saying we like I was in there writing it, but the curriculum that the company constructed and built for Texas, we were taking that and selling it as a national product. And I realized that this actually happens very often. So me teaching in Phoenix, I can recall a lesson where I taught about probability. What are the odds of you pulling a spades in a deck of cards or hearts in a deck of cards? And these students were just like disengaged. And I stopped the class. I'm like, hey, what's going on? What's going on? They're like, well, Mr. Campbell, we don't, one kid was like, what's a spade? I'm like, it's 13 in a deck. It's 4 different clubs, etc. He's like, oh, you mean Uno? No, playing cards. But truthfully, it had nothing to do with their culture. They had no experience playing it. So I was teaching with a lesson that was never tailored to my kids to begin with. So how do I make it more relevant for them? How do I make sure that they can see themselves in it? They also can see how it leads them to the next level. But it's also scaffolding to the level that they are, not lowering our bar, keeping the bar high, but scaffolding to the level that they're at and showing them that getting to this bar is achievable. So how do we take the content, curriculum, resources, et cetera, that we're given and make sure that they're tailored to our students? So those are the 4 pillars that we work from as an organization. Today, we're actually going to be focusing on the importance of systems. So I'm not sure if you guys have anything to write with or what, but we're going to send out some notes after this as well. So if you happen to not catch something or like, oh man, you're going through these slides too fast, fine, we're going to send it to you. So just keep that in mind. But if you are taking notes, the definition that we are speaking from as far as a system is concerned are expectations and procedures that provide a safe and trusted learning environment for all. So the main 2 parts of that, expectations and procedures. They provide a safe and trusted learning environment for all. The 3 pillars of a system that we're going to talk about is actually going to be based on an analogy that we're going to utilize, and it's something that we have all been a part of. So you've all been a part of systems, whether it be in the classroom, out the classroom. Today, we're going to talk about the traffic system. So all of us have been on the road. We've experienced good drivers, bad drivers. We might have been bad drivers ourselves, who knows? But we all have experience there, which is the reason why we want to use this as an example. The one thing I want you to note is that systems are not just behavioral, they're also non-behavioral systems. So just keep that in mind. This is just for the sake of this example. So the 3 pillars of a system, the first one is based on a set of established rules. So when you're driving, there is a set of rules that we should know about. We know that if there's a red light, we stop. If there's a green light, we go. If there's a speed limit, we have to follow it. We're not supposed to go over it. I think, putting on a blinker when you get over, like these are rules that are widely known. We can access them, which is really important. I can go online and look up all the rules that Arizona has or California or whomever has about the traffic system, and I can know exactly what those expectations are. So the traffic system is based on a set of established rules. The second thing is it is independently standing. What that means is that no matter what politician is in office, what driver is on the road, or what law enforcement officer happens to be patrolling, the rules never change. The reason that we're bringing that up and just taking it back to the classroom, sometimes like if it's independently standing, like I said before, we are emotional biased humans by nature. So something that independently is standing, it does not depend on how our mood is, how our day is. You may have a guest teacher where the students still know exactly what's expected of them. They know the procedures, they know the expectations. It's because we have a system that's independently standing. So the traffic system is independently standing because it doesn't matter who we come in contact with, they're the same set of rules and the same expectations. And the last thing is understood and hopefully followed by all parties involved. When you happen to get pulled over by the police, hopefully you've never been pulled over because you guys follow all the rules when you're driving. But I have had an experience where I was pulled over by the police, and the first thing I noticed was they came to my window and they said, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" The reason they asked this question, which I'm sure is a commonality, they're supposed to do that with everyone, is because they want to make sure that they're on the same page as you. The rules are not exclusive to the law enforcement. It's not exclusive to the lawmakers. It's not exclusive to the drivers. Everyone knows what the rules are. Now, if there happen to be some bad apples or seeds that take advantage of those rules, that's different. But the expectation is that they are understood and followed by all parties, which means that I can be, I can have someone who pulls me over and tells me, you were speeding today, I can have it tomorrow. If I continue to do it, I know that I am taking a risk. Now, the one thing to understand about this as well is it's my decision. It's my choice if I want to run a red light. It's my choice if I want to not put on a blinker, if I want to go faster than I'm supposed to. It's all my decision, and I'm choosing to go further in this system, whatever the system may be. Now, there also are consequences if you happen to not meet the expectations. And one of them is you get a ticket. So let's just take that example. Let's say I get a ticket and it's a fine for $50. If I don't pay it, which is my choice, then I know it may double. That's something that is written out. It actually says it on the ticket in a lot of cases. It just says it online. If I don't pay it after it doubles, I may be asked to come into court to see a judge. It's my decision to not pay it again. Let's say I don't go in to see the judge, then there may be a warrant. Let's say I don't turn myself in, then I may end up in let's just say it keeps on going further and further. But the main thing to understand is it was my decision to get there. It was my choice not to pay it. It was my choice not to pay when it doubled. It was my choice not to show up. It was all my choice. So in our classrooms and when we're working with students, a lot of times when we don't have strong systems in place, then it depends very heavily on how we are able to administer it as humans. And since we are naturally emotional and biased creatures, then we may not handle it the same one day that we handle it the next day. And what that does is it introduces my teacher's unfair. They have favorites. They have, they care about this person more than this person, et cetera, et cetera. But if they know that there's a system in place, they know the rules that are established, they know that it's independently standing, then they can only blame themselves if they happen to go forward in the system based on them not meeting expectations or surpassing expectations, because a reward system is also a system. So that is the concept that we're going to be talking about today. And we're going to go even further with this because the topic for today is virtual systems. Now, there's a lot more information about systems that we can get into, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit later. But we want to talk about virtual systems. Virtual systems, we have three different things that we're going to be talking about. And this is where I want you all to engage. Believe me, I'm tired of talking almost already. I get tired of my own voice. I like you hear your own recording, like, oh, that's how it sounds. So that's how I feel in my head. So I need you guys to be with me on this and chime in where you see fit. But we're going to give three different strategies for enhancing your virtual systems. The first thing, we talked about it, expectations. Establish your expectations behaviorally and academically. What do you expect from students? I had a friend tell me this one time. I went to him, I say, I don't know why this happened. I don't know why this person is acting like this. And their response was, common sense is not common to everyone. You can't be mad if you did not tell them how you want them to respond to something. They're acting on what we talked about before, your cultural awareness. They're acting on their own experiences, their own things that they have gone through in life, etc. They did not know your standard in order to not meet your expectations. So the first step to doing that, express what they are. Now, how you go about expressing your expectations is totally up to you. There are a lot of different strategies for that. One of them is to go over it with your students. You could also create them and then go over them with your students and see what they think about it. But however you do it, there needs to be an established set of expectations. The expectations that we are going to highlight today, the first one, achievement. What are your expectations for achievement, even virtually? What do you want your students to be able to do? Where do you want them to end up by the end of all this, by the end of the day, the lesson, what do you want them to do on the assessment? What do you expect from them achievement-wise? Engagement. Now, virtually, how do I say this? Your attention span actually goes down. So there's a percentage, and I don't know how accurate it is, but it said 80% of communication is nonverbal. And the reason I say I don't know how accurate it is the 80%. When people just attach random stats, you're like, well, who did you test? I never got this survey. But the concept that they're trying to say is that most of communication is nonverbal. And I'll give you an example. If someone comes to me and says, hey, what direction is Wendy's? And I point to the right, but I say left, which way are they going to go? They're going to go the way I'm saying or the way I'm pointing. Like, I'm literally pointing this way. You're going to walk the other way just because of what I said. Just think about that. Nonverbal communication is the biggest form or the most established form of communication. So we want to make sure we understand. We may be losing that with going virtual. So engagement is a huge thing. What are your expectations for engagement? Do you expect them to speak with you when they first log on? Do you expect them to do partner activities. You expect them to do chatting, et cetera, et cetera. Whatever it is, establish your expectations. How do you want them to converse, or their conversational expectations? Self-explanatory. You're going to be talking, you're going to get tired of your own voice, I promise, and you're going to want to know, want them to have some type of expectations for conversation. Their collaboration. I know a huge part of teaching is allowing the students to do peer-to-peer or to learn off of each other. What are your expectations for that now that we're virtual? Do you expect them to get together offline? Do you have ways for them to get together online, et cetera, et cetera? And the last thing, technology. What are your expectations for technology? You may be teaching and you hear pots banging in the background and TV. Why do I hear this? Mute yourself, mute yourself. It might go a lot better if you just explain what your expectations are and then allow the students to know what you want from them when they're logging on. When they log on, do you want them to automatically mute? Do you want their videos to be on? Do you want them to go into a room where it's quiet? What is the lighting? Do you want there to be lighting, et cetera? Whatever it is, make sure you express your expectations. And this is the point where I want to hear from you all. What did we miss? What other expectations can you express virtually from your, or can you express virtually to your students for them to respond to? What is not quite on this list that is another great area to establish your expectations? Feel free to send it in the chat room. I forgot to say this, but there is a way for you to send it to everyone. There's also a way for you to send it privately if you prefer to just message me one-on-one. If you can't think of any, that's totally fine. I just want to give an opportunity for you all as experts to share if there happens to be something that we did not cover. Social and emotional. Can you express, or can you just briefly say what do you mean by how do you establish expectations for social and emotional learning? Daily, weekly check-ins. Yes, let's take the content away. The way the world is now, content can be learned without a teacher. I'm being honest. It can be learned without a teacher. It's more effective with the teacher. The teacher is the single most important aspect to learning, but the content itself can be learned outside of the school. So with that being said, we have to make sure we understand coming to school is not just a content-based decision, right? It's also because we need them to grow socially, we need them to grow emotionally. We also, in some instances, we want to feed them. We want to see how they're doing. We want to give them a break from whatever their home life may be. There are millions of different things or reasons why we as teachers have the most important job on earth. Content is a huge part, but there are so many other things that we also need to keep in mind. And those daily or weekly check-ins, like Michelle was saying, are so important to make sure that we are keeping up with their lives and building that relationship up, because it gives us a position that's more advantageous to reaching them at whatever level they are as well. So so important what you just said. I appreciate you for chiming in. How to keep it to the people in class while doing this in spring. There was a young man hacking it. Ah, okay. So your expectations for, I'm assuming that you do not teach young kids. Maybe you teach middle school or high school kids where they may share information with their peers that weren't in class at that time. You can feel free to chat in. I'm going to go with that assumption and keep going with it. Just feel free to chat in if anything is different. But that's also very important as well, because if, you know, there is an element of surprise in our lessons. We want to make sure that we're hitting it and we're truly gauging where students are. And it's hard to do that when other students are sharing information with other students as well. There was also a hacking in a meeting. I'm not sure how do we set expectation for that. I guess you can make sure that you're talking to the students saying, hey, make sure that this is exclusive to us. Don't share the links or anything with anybody else. That's another good example to make sure that you share your expectations. So I appreciate you for sharing that as well. And these are not going to be exclusive to just this meeting. You're going to start teaching. You're going to realize, man, I should have established expectation by there. It's never too late. It could be, 3 weeks after school started, like, okay, I missed the first day where we really want to establish expectations. If you see something that needs to be mentioned, go ahead and talk about it right then and there. It's totally fine to establish expectations even after your lesson or the school year has started. But let's move on to the second example for how to enhance systems virtually. And that is I'm sorry, I missed my own point. Pro tip, detail the expectations often, and then also make it available for students to review if possible. The reason why we say that is because a lot of times, at least when I first started teaching, I would say, I told the students that. I don't get why they don't remember it. But truthfully, everybody forgets stuff. If I asked you everything I talked about so far on this session, I'm sure that there may be some things that fall through the cracks. We just want to make sure that we're detailing our expectations before it happens. It's being proactive, and then also going back to the system, the traffic system, it is available for us to view. So somehow, some way, if you can give these expectations to the students, that way that not only that I go over them often, but the students also have it in some sort of PDF or whatever, where they can look at what the expectations are. And Melody agrees. I appreciate that. All right, so now we get into the second tip, which is your lesson flow. Now we're gonna breeze through this just a little bit because we are getting close to the half-hour mark. I really wanted to catch you guys at the half-hour mark, but the lesson flow is also really important for establishing a type of system in your class. Since you're going to be virtual, there are going to be inconsistencies everywhere you look. If they were in school, if you think about it, the school has a school flow. Most schools that I've been to, whether it be elementary, middle school, or high school, you come in at a certain time, you have to give or maybe you go into your class. Let's start with elementary. You go into your class, you cover maybe reading. You get 30 minutes of reading when you first get there. Maybe you have math after that. Like, there is a flow of the lesson in elementary. In middle school, same thing. You go into your homeroom class to check in with your teacher. You go into your first period, your second period, your third period. Then you have lunch. Then you have this, you have that. There is a flow that goes into us presenting our content and everything as educators. So including that within your lesson is also going to be really important for making sure that the students know what's expected of them as far as the structure of the lesson. So I went ahead and came up with a lesson flow, and this is because I was a middle school and high school math teacher. So this is going to be a math flow for that age group, but obviously you can come up with your own. But I have a few things that I want to highlight for you all to think about. So the first 3 minutes of check-in, how are you doing? A lot of times the students, this may be their outlet. School is their outlet. We have seen that time and time again. So we want to make sure that even though they're not getting the same type of outlet physically, we can still give them an opportunity to talk about something that's not content related, and you'll be surprised what your students open up with. So the first 3 minutes, check in. How are you doing? What's going on in you all's lives? What have you seen, et cetera, et cetera. This can also be a way to help not start something before the kids get into whatever platform you happen to be using, because if they come in a little later, now you got to review things, you got to follow up with the student. Like, no, let's just give them a little bit of time. We know that the first few minutes we're going to be checking in. After that, attendance. I'm not sure what you all's attendance policy is when you're going to be working, but when I was teaching, that was something that was expected every class period that came in. So that would be the next thing. So the first 5 minutes, check in and attendance. After that, we get into reviewing previous material. So their homework from the previous day, maybe it was a packet that they did, a pre-test, whatever it may be. It's just covering some stuff that we've already previously gone over, but also giving an opportunity to revisit some of those things that happen to not have been met with mastery. So the next 10 minutes will be revisiting some of those things that were not met with mastery, but also revisiting sub-objectives that are necessary for the lesson that I'm going to get into. So if you notice, the first 22 minutes, we are checking in with the students, we're doing attendance, and we're covering everything that they have gone over before. It's nothing new, no new material, but this is a great way for you to see where your students currently are. After that, we would have a break, and this break would be 5 minutes. I'm sorry I didn't put the time there. I meant to put a 5-minute break, or focus group. So your students, the differentiation is going to be very difficult virtually, but there is a way for you to do this in your lessons. So let's say you had a focus group. You noticed that there were 6 students that you had that didn't quite catch what you were talking about. This is opportunity for those students. You can create a group for them, or you can ask the other students to mute or to go grab water or whatever, and then come back while you have an opportunity to work with this focus group. And trying to keep that focus group at 3 minutes or so. That way they also get a little break, and then we come back into, and now we're going to be covering new material. So before the break is all, covering old material. After we had the break, now we get into new material. The other important thing about the break is we know their attention span is shorter, so we want to make sure that we give them an opportunity to reset. And sometimes asking them to go get water or have a snack is an opportunity for their mind to reset. That way, when we get into the new concepts, they have a new training of mind for them to remaster some of these things. From there, allowing collaboration. We'll talk about how to collaborate virtually as well on the next slide. But allowing collaboration is just an opportunity. I mean, they text all the time. It's funny because the kids have been doing all this stuff anyway. We're just catching up as educators to the texting and the video chats and FaceTime, et cetera, that they've been doing for years and years. So allowing some sort of collaboration, that way I gave them the content as a teacher. We know peer-to-peer instruction is also an effective form of teaching. So allowing 5 minutes for that to happen. And then finally, the wrap up where we come back together and conclude what we spoke about today, maybe revisit some of those sub-objectives, talk about how it leads into this new concept that we've been talking about, and then maybe a ticket out if you still have, or if you have a way to assess the students, and then their homework as well. So this will be a lesson flow. And remember, yours will look differently if you are in elementary, or if you're not math or you're physical education or something like that. It may look very differently, but make sure that you have a lesson flow. That way the students have some form of consistency when they log into your classroom. Now, I said I was going to breeze through that one. The next one, though, that we're going to talk about, the last idea I want you all to engage with as well, is engagement. I didn't even mean to do that. That wasn't just like some corny play on like, I want you to engage. Now we're talking about engagement. That was really by mistake. But engagement is the third tip. Engaging your students looks it looks so different virtually than in the classroom, obviously, but there are many ways to do it. So one of the first tips, I have 5 tips actually for you all. Incorporate peer-to-peer collaboration, whatever that looks like to you. Just do some playing and some digging. Connect with some of the teachers that are at your school, maybe some of your teacher friends that you know at other schools, and talk to them about how are you incorporating peer-to-peer collaboration. One of the great ways to do it is utilizing a break room or breakout room. Now, I want you all to know this is a huge thing. I didn't know that Zoom had this, but there's a way for all of your students to be, we're all having a whole group. There's a way to include an add-on that calls for breakout rooms. So you go in there and say, I want 8 rooms, and each room has 3 kids, and you just click randomize or click whatever the button says, and it breaks the students into their own groups of 3. And you, as the host, can jump into any one of those rooms to hear what the students are talking about, or to talk to them and to chime in and help them out. And then you can also end it whenever you want to end it, or you can set a timer. And what I found out was that this was not just exclusive to Zoom. This was also in GoToMeeting. I believe there are other features, like there's a feature on the Microsoft video conferencing as well. But check with your video conferencing system that your school is going to be utilizing and see if they have a break room. It's a great way for peer-to-peer collaboration. The third thing, enhance your relevancy by including items from the students' lives. We talked about that in the last slide. We also had people who are chiming in saying like, hey, a good thing is for the social and emotional, checking in with them. Our world today is going to be written in the history books, and right now we're living in a moment of history, which you can say about any time, but this very specific moment will be something that's talked about for a long time. And it's important to just see where kids are in these moments, where it be with COVID, whether it be with Black Lives Matters movement, or with anything else that's going on. It's just a really good time to incorporate some of those things within your instruction. Now, I'm not saying to get political. I know there's a separation of church and state and all that. I'm not saying that at all, but being aware of it, including new things that the students are doing. I know TikTok is a huge thing. If the kids want a TikTok, I mean, maybe that can be how you introduce a lesson. Maybe you could do a TikTok dance yourself. Who knows? But include items and things like that from the students' lives in order to enhance your lesson. The fourth thing, utilize a chat box feature. They like to text. I mean, most of the time they're probably texting in school at some point in time, hopefully not in class, but in passing, in the bathroom, at lunch, whatever. They love to chat, to text. Utilize it. Allow them to do it. It also introduces an opportunity for them to take a break from what's going on and actually start typing and whatnot. And the last thing that I am going to suggest, be aware of the depth of attention needed. What that means is simply every task that we ask our students to do requires them to use a specific need or a specific sense or whatever, right? So if I'm talking right now and I'm asking you to take notes, let's just say that's the case, you don't have to think much. There's not much critical thinking going on. You're more so just replicating what I'm speaking about or what I'm giving you to take notes on. So that's just one thing. It's not a depth of attention needed there. But let's say I had you conversing with someone and taking notes on what you guys were talking about. Now you have to not only debate with this person, you also have to listen to what they have to say. You have to take notes. Like there's more requirements from you in order to complete the task or to listen in that instance than it would be if it was simply just note taking. So being aware of the tasks that you are presenting to your students and what is asking for students to do, and recognizing that when it's just one or two things that you're really asking the students to do, listen, write, like that's note taking. Listen to me, write it down, or read, write. Those are simple because we want to make sure that that they have an opportunity to use a depth of their abilities for tasks, and that will actually increase the engagement as well. So at this time, I want to see what other strategies you all have for engagement. Anything that you want to share as far as how to keep our students engaged through lessons. Padlet, I just learned about Padlet. Can you give us just a brief understanding of what Padlet is? And keep in mind, everyone that's reading, is your job to go and do more research on it. So Michelle, we appreciate you for sharing, but don't feel like you have to give an essay. Just give a quick synopsis of what exactly is Padlet as far as engagement. And while she's writing that, there are also surveys that you can implement. There are a lot of different things that you can do where in the lesson you can blast it out to your students, and then they can actually utilize it to get the engagement up as well. Opportunity for collaboration, perfect. Okay, so your job then is to, sorry, my dog is barking. Your job then is to actually look into Padlet. It's a great suggestion from one of our amazing educators who happens to be on the call with us today. So look into that and see how exactly Padlet can be used to enhance the engagement. So just to recap, we are coming to a close. Just to recap, the 3 ideas in order to enhance systems virtually: establish your expectations. Remember, utilize them for making sure that everyone's on the same page as far as what the standards are. So establish your expectations, and the pro tips are to remind students about them regularly, proactively. So before we get into whatever it is that you have expectations for, feel free to remind students what those expectations are. And then also, if there's a way to get it into their hands, whether it be a PDF or something that you post into the chat room, that's another example. The second thing, develop a lesson flow. So how is your lesson going to actually flow when the students come in, so that way they know what to expect? And then also enhance the student engagement. We had a couple more chats that came in. I just wanted to make sure that I'm respecting our participation. So building off 3 projects, keep them curious rather than keeping them busy. That's a great word. Keep them curious rather than just keep them busy. So busy work is just, I guess it's a little more mindless than work that intrigues curiosity, because then it also gets them to want to look offline or look when they're done hearing from you. Technology should be used as a tool rather than a result. Very, very good words, wisdom right there. Michelle also posted a link. It says it's an example from a webinar that she was on this morning. So once I end this call, that link will no longer be available. So if you want, you can right click or highlight that link and copy it into your own browser. That way it doesn't go once we move on. Parent communication, huge, absolutely. Classroom Dojo, I love it. So Classroom Dojo, if you haven't used that before, it's exactly, it keeps everybody in the loop on what's going on. You can even attach points. I'm not exactly sure how to use it virtually, but I'm sure, the makers of Classroom Dojo were so innovative that I'm sure they also figured out how to put some videos or whatever in to where you can seamlessly use it virtually as well. So perfect. So we discussed those 3 expectations, the things that we want you all to continue your learning on. First off, virtual behavior system, specifically behavior. It reinforces expectations. So this is something you may want to check with your administration about. But like I said, with the traffic system, if there was no consequence that was attached to the expectations, then it may look a lot differently when we're driving. If I know that there's nothing's going to happen to me, or there's not going to be any result from me speeding or whatever, then it may be something else that I don't consider as much. Now, that does not have to mean a negative consequence. It could be an academic consequence. It could be a conversation that you just want to have with them offline. Like, it doesn't have to be anything bad. It could be a restorative practice type of thing. But just keeping in mind that having something to where the students know this is what happens when the expectations are surpassed, like some type of reward or whatever. This is what happens when the expectations are not quite met. Having that as a system is also going to do wonders for you. So continue your learning on that. More engagement strategies. We talked about a few today. You ever get into a debate with someone and maybe you didn't win the debate, you didn't lose it, but you go to sleep to that night like, man, I should have said that. So these engagement strategies, there's going to be more that come up. There's going to be more that you think about. Please share them with people, talk to other people about it, but do your own research in order to add to that list, because there are some great strategies out there, and we did not cover all of them, obviously. And the last thing, locate, play around with the breakout room. That was one thing that I talked about before. Whatever video conferencing platform that you're using, they may have this breakout room option, but it also might depend on what your school has adopted. They may have purchased a specific plan that does not include breakout rooms, or they may have you talking to them may get them to say, oh, you know what, we should update this, or we should have that add-on because it's a great feature. So locate, play around with the breakout rooms as well. Now, before we get off, I do want to let you guys know, we now have available, I actually have it. It's fresh off the presses. We just published the first workbook for culturally responsive teaching. It's titled CRT 101, An Introduction to Culturally Responsive Teaching, and it has everything about our model for the cultural awareness, the systems, the building relationships, the rigorous and accessible content. It has concepts, mindset triggers, also activities in order to enhance that. And it's about 45 pages of just activities and things to really help to enhance culturally responsive teaching. And it is now available. So if you go onto our website, theurbanconnectionproject.org, there's an option for you to purchase this, and you may be the first one that purchases it. We literally just published it like yesterday. We just got these in yesterday. So if you are interested in it or you want to learn more about it, please go to our website and check that out. You can also get in contact with us. But I do appreciate you all's time and for spending time with me today. I know that time and money are huge things you do not play with educators about. So we never take it for granted. So appreciate you all's time, and I'll stay on for a second if you will have any additional questions. But other than that, if you don't, feel free to leave. And thank you again for joining.